Welcome to the 101 Ways podcast. This is us giving back to the tech community. And with 101 ways to solve any problem, we hope you'll find the right expertise and ideas here to solve yours. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify or YouTube or wherever you listen or watch so you can find out where the next episode arrives. Got plenty in the pipeline. And today I'm joined by Nick Morgan. Nick Morgan is a technology director at 101 Ways. Welcome, Nick. That's a pleasure. And I am your host, Ollie Happy, product principal at 101 Ways. So today's topic is funding your modernization effort. So let's start off, Nick, with a little bit about you because you're new to the audience and what got you to here. And then we'll move into modernization. Over to you, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, my name's Nick. I'm a director of technology for 101 Ways. I've been at 101 Ways now for about 18 months, worked across a number of interesting clients. And prior to 101 Ways, I was a senior technical architect working for an agency that worked with many FTSE 500 companies. And then I guess before then, I'd been contracting as a principal or a tech lead or some variation of that for a good 6 or 7 years. I've quite an interesting said that completely wrong. I had an interesting start in tech, whereas I started with my own startup, kind of grew, and that's how I got involved on the technology side. And then after that, that's when I sort of started to get involved in tech a bit more seriously after that venture. So it's quite of an unusual start in technology, whereas most people sort of do a comp sci degree and they sort of move up. And mine was always abnormal routes, should we say. So excuse me.
Yeah. But, that's brought with it, I would imagine, a lot of interesting insights, having walked the talk, started the business and stood in what would be many of your clients' shoes in the past, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because I guess it's afforded me a perspective that a lot of technologists sometimes struggle with, which is I don't just think about it from a tech point of view. I'm thinking about it from the wider picture, the business perspective. And obviously that's great for consultancy, but obviously, I guess most people watching this, if they are tech enthusiasts, they can kind of relate to their focus is on the next shiny thing, not necessarily what's right for the business at that moment, etc. So it's one of those things, right?
Sure. Thank you. Cool. And just so that folks back home know, I've been through quite a number of modernizations over my sort of 20 years or so. And I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on, first of all, what modernization is.
Absolutely. So I've just completed my 12th modernization project, actually, 101 Ways, with the client that we have. And I guess in terms of what modernization means to me, I think very succinctly, it's, I guess, the process of upgrading or transforming an existing system. It could be the old technology, it could be the architecture, whatever it is, into a better system. So it could be taking something old, replacing it with modern technologies. It could just be taking a process and improving it. It could be, just as simple as adding a new technology and maybe a content management system or something. It's just about upgrading, really, to be honest.
Good description. Okay, thank you. So effectively upgrading or improving some element of technology in your estate. Okay.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Very good. All right. So let's now talk briefly about the different approaches to modernizing a part of your estate or all of your estate. And then we'll go into some of the trends that you've been seeing.
No, definitely. It's something I've been thinking about a lot more recently. Actually, I think there's clearly defined 4 approaches. First one I would always say is the Big Bang approach. I think everyone is familiar with the Big Bang approach. You take your old system, you completely rewrite it. You overhaul an entire system, or it could be an entire domain, that sort of stuff. I guess the second area I would look at would be more of a incremental phased approach. So it's more doing things step by step, maybe focus on one system, we'll review that. If that goes well, then you might improve another system and so on. So it's a bit of a cascading effort. I think the third approach could be more of a hybrid approach. So maybe you recognize that your core systems needs to be uplifted, shifted, and redone completely. But the outlining systems that are less important, maybe you take the incremental approach. And I guess finally, for the fourth one, I guess it's more selective modernization. So maybe it's not a priority for you to touch all the systems, but maybe there's one system that needs to be upgraded. And I guess what that's different from the incremental or phased approach is you're only looking to do one thing and then that's it. So I guess that's kind of how I would categorize it, to be honest.
Okay. And my impression of past approaches to technology is that there have definitely been, I've definitely seen a hybrid approach in the sense that we just need our contact center to be in the cloud. Let's just move that into the cloud, and we'll spin up a separate team, and we'll really have that separate to the rest of the web app or the traditional business with a web presence. I've definitely seen some of that. Beyond that, I've seen a lot of Big Bang. So let's just talk about that. And I think most people coming into this episode would have been expecting us to talk about Big Bang. So why do people start there? And what are some of the pros and cons? Perhaps contrasting it with incremental.
Yeah, I guess typically how people get to the Big Bang is it's almost like a silver bullet approach. Typically it's because they're aware that maybe there's a problem or the system's inefficient, but it's making money. And perhaps it just wasn't the right time for the business to invest into modernizing or whatever it is. Maybe there were different priorities to the business. Maybe you're going from a startup to a scale up. You're rapidly scaling. So actually it's more important to sort of get more market share and that sort of stuff and grow your product as opposed to improving the core system. I think sometimes it festers a little bit until when it becomes a problem that's so untenable, you have to attack it head on, right? It's this big Goliath, a big spaghetti sort of monstrosity. But in terms of maybe doing incremental or phased as an alternative, I guess that there is some level of inherent risk in the sense that you may, if you're adopting, say, a new language or a new set of principles, right, to do it. So maybe your old system's in Ruby, now you're going to build it in Java or something like that. That's a different skill set. There's an investment in sort of people. You may not necessarily have the expertise in-house to do that. So you may have to consider actually going outwardly and getting some third-party assistance or hiring and that sort of stuff. If that doesn't go well for whatever reason, does that mean then that people you've hired or the investment you put into that is now being migrated back to the old system? How does that work, right? So I think usually when people do the Big Bang, it's because they're like, well, this is our future. We cannot fail. We're 100% committed. In that way, we're going to commit an enormous sum of money or enormous sum of resource in terms of personnel at hitting the target. And I guess incremental just feels a little bit like you're leaving the door open to it sort of potentially going bad or going back to the old system. And I guess that's why people think. But I think generally speaking, I guess technologists as well in general, we think very grandiose. So part of the reason why Agile is so popular, Agile needed to be created because technologists thinking waterfall. I got to do an off system. Okay, cool. To do that, I've got to do I've got my long shopping list of stuff.
And product people as well, to be honest. We think about all the steps to get us to the goal.
Yeah, exactly. And then you go off and you go and do it. And then the thing you said would take a day actually takes 5 days and so on and so on and so on. So I don't know if it's, that's just my opinion. I don't know if it's because human beings, you can just compartmentalize and you can go, right, we're going to do the whole thing as opposed to one little thing and do it really well. I don't know.
Yeah. And it's really good to see incremental approach to modernization emerging in the last 3 or 4 years because it de-risks things and it just allows each piece to speak for itself. It's almost an agile way to modernize, isn't it?
No, absolutely. And like I say, like I said with the incremental, there are risks of doing it in terms of if you don't continue with it, etc. But I think it's the most de-risked way of doing it. If you're adopting a technology or a framework or whatever it is that you've never used before, it's better you expose partial bits of your system to this. Because like I say, if it goes wrong, you go back to the drawing board. Whereas if it goes correctly, then great, the world's your oyster. You can then just continue.
Yes. And let's just apply this to a really common scenario of strangling the monolith. So monolith being the single service, single code base, where a lot of us start either within a traditional larger business or a startup. And of course, there comes a point where there are too many teams working on that single code base and they trip over each other and things become quite complex. What's really interesting is I've definitely seen, and I know you have, a lot of big bang approach to just replace the monolith. Just everything will get built as exactly as it is today. Just a lift and shift of microservice by microservice. Many teams working in parallel, and I've actually seen that stumble and take a lot longer than initially expected. Versus this emerging incremental approach, which is just so healthy, isn't it? Do you want to talk about how incremental approach could be applied to building up microservices from scratch?
No, definitely. So I guess in terms of what you were saying about going from monolith and then you do a big bang approach to microservices. Typically, what happens is you then just have a monolith or a distributed monolith with microservices because there's a different approach. But I think in terms of doing it incrementally, it really gives you the opportunity to say take a system and let's just say payments for a business. You can extract that out of the monolith. You can create a beautiful maybe you do a microservice architecture, maybe you do event-driven design. I don't know. But whatever you do with it, you have the opportunity to really refine and architect that and do it well. You use modern technology to make it better than what you had previously. Maybe for you, a KPI might be to increase the processing time. Maybe in the old system, maybe it was it took like 45 seconds or whatever it is. And now it's time to actually really refine it down, get it down to 5 seconds, make it expandable. So you have multiple, payment service providers or alternative payment service providers. Different payment methods, etc. As much as you can do that in a monolith, it's much better if you have an isolated focus. So you can really narrow and make something more specialist. Have a narrow specialist focus on what you want to do, and de-risks everything because you're only focusing on that area in this term payments, as opposed to if you're trying to do this while also modernizing 12 other systems, you have a lot of things in parallel that will need to work with each other. But what the monolith needs payments for. You know how the monolith interacts with payments. So just taking it into its own services and focusing on that, you can do that really well. And like I say, down the line, then now we've done payments. Orders looking a bit junky. Let's extract that from the monolith. So it's a much safer approach in terms of doing things in a small way with a defined scope very well and yielding results very quickly.
And speaking of results, it's also a really nice way to move incrementally towards exposing APIs or interacting with external parties, right?
Yeah, precisely. And I think that's the thing as well is when you move from one thing to another in modernization, typically what you have a really unique opportunity to think about the business. Where's the business going to be in 5 to 10 years? So maybe we're not doing, say, third-party integration into our system today. But that's probably on our 5-year roadmap. And if we want this system to support that, that means we should architect the system in a way that can do it. Doesn't mean we're going to set it up today and not use it, but we should make a system that's flexible enough. So if in 4 or 5 years' time, actually, now's the time to do this. We're not going and doing modernization free. We're just expanding on what we have as opposed to going back to the drawing board and keep doing this every 5 years, which is another problem I see a lot of people do, which is why people fear big bang or iterative approaches, because they fear they're going to have to keep doing that every 2 or 3 years. And it's going to be a never ending cycle of, innovation, exploitation, and so on. It's just this endless.
Yes. And of course, that's what's very attractive about a big bang, isn't it? Because there's this seductive sort of idealistic view that it might take us 18 months, but then we'll have 5 years of plain sailing. And of course, that's not the case. Technology moves a long way in 5 years.
Yeah, precisely. I mean, I was saying this to someone the other day. I still remember about 6 years ago when Next was a well-known framework, but it wasn't super widely adopted on enterprises in the UK. And I was having to convince the CTO to let us go from just React TypeScript to Next. And there were lots of reasons why we wanted to do it, because we wanted to do effective server-side rendering, that sort of stuff. But I still remember that being risky. And we agreed to wait 12 months to see if this next thing plans out. And it did. So then we changed it a year later. But the reason I mention that is just to your effort. Technology is always evolving. Think about generative AI. Like 3 years ago, no one really knew about ChatGPT, GPT-2, etc. Now people use it every day. They can't exactly go out of the house without engaging with it on any sort of app, etc. So yeah, it's technology evolves insanely fast.
Yes. And speaking of technology evolving insanely fast, what does the last 18 months of the economy globally tell us about board level appetites for modernization and the environment that a CTO who knows something needs to modernize is currently operating within?
So it's interesting. So I think we're staring down the barrel of a recession. And typically when that happens, I guess that's when board appetites start to become a little bit more restrictive. But conversely, what we've seen in the last 18 months is actually there's a lot more investiture into modernization. And I think that's because a lot modern systems that are done well and architected well require less people to maintain and build upon them. So, typically if you were going to build this, massive new system for an enterprise, maybe you need 100 people. Nowadays, if it's really well done, you will need 20 people, and those 20 people still add new features and do a lot of good stuff. So I think that at an appetite level, we're seeing it rise up a little bit and actually increase, because I think there's more of an understanding now about the opportunity. There's a lot more people saying, hey, we need to modernize our systems, get data involved, so down the line we can plan something to do with AI or machine learning, etc. So it's weird. Historically, I've always seen it go down, but actually in the last 24 months, I'm actually seeing it skyrocket. The amount of people that are coming to us as a consultancy saying, hey, we need to modernize the system, we want to do this thing, and we want to prepare ourselves for AI and do this and the other, that's going through the roof. And I honestly, the start of the year, I expected it to plateau, not go up, but it's really going up now, which is great. I mean, obviously, I guess that's a testament to all of the efforts of our BDC and all that stuff as well to a certain degree. But I think that, no one would be successful if the appetite wasn't there, and the appetite is really there.
So although the global economy and perhaps business performance might have plateaued a bit, it could be quite a good time to answer the call from the board to develop an AI strategy and start to think about what is required in the estate in order to build something new. So
absolutely, yeah.
So thinking about a CTO, taking a retail business with a web presence, what would be your advice to their approach? Perhaps they're new into their role and perhaps new to the business. They take a look around the estate, they listen to all the engineering managers and their architects and think, there's some work that needs to be done here. What would be your advice to their approach, step by step, to begin getting investment and buy-in to the process of modernization in their new firm?
I think I guess the first step is always to really understand the domain and the people who interact with it is really well. So know what it's about, know what you're doing, know the people who it's weaving it. For example, if you're touching a system that is largely used by the marketing automation team, make damn sure you know who in that team interacts with it. So when you are going to propose something, you have those people on your side and say, yes, we want this too, so you help buy it. I think then that leads into my second point, which is about building a strong business case. So you need to think about what are the tangible benefits. For example, their cost savings, is there increased efficiency within teams? What about risk mitigation? Are we improving customer experience, which could lead to more revenue, that sort of stuff. So you need to be able to demonstrate what the return on investment is and then the potential for long-term gains. I think then from that, because everyone always starts with a long list and they want to build this magic stuff, I think the third step then for me is to then prioritize what initiative is most important. So, you may go to this area is not looking good. Actually, I want to do these 12 things. Let's scale that down. What are the one or two things you can do that have the largest impact and benefit for the business? And once you've done that, and once you've proven to the board it can be done, then you can go tackle the other 10 things because they'll be really overjoyed that, you've made a case, etc. I think that it's a case of really understanding, like I say, from understanding the domain and what you're doing in the investment stuff, get buy-in from people ahead of time. If you need to get your chief product officer involved, have a conversation with them. If you need to get your marketing officer, have a conversation with them. Have a conversation with your chief revenue or financial officer, just to even understand, hey, is there even room in the budget for me to propose this? Because obviously the last thing you want to do is go in there and say, hey, I need £5 million to this thing. There's no budget for it, right? You need to really understand the business. Is the business doing well? The last thing you want to do is come to the table and say, hey, can I have £5 million, please? When you're experiencing a loss and people are talking about cutting staff, etc. So for me, it comes down to understand the domain very clearly, build a business case, get the right people invested in the idea, because you'll need them on your side at the board to say, yes, we need this. Understand the dynamics of your business, the market, etc., and then present with all of those factors in place. Very strategically within these one or two things and these outcomes. I think once you do that, I think that's the best approach to funding modernization, because it depends on the stakeholder you're speaking to. They'll be worried, well, our existing system works really well now. Why do we need to touch it? Why do we need to mess with it? And actually, if you're not a lone voice in the room, if actually your chief product officer comes and says, well, actually, these are the problems we have at the product level with it. The marketing team says, yeah, this is actually what the marketing team has a problem with. But actually, if we do all of this, this is the brand new world order. This is this fantastic thing we could do. This is going to be great, etc. So I think by having that basin, not only will it increase your likelihood of success, but it also takes the fear element away. And when you propose, we need to rebuild a new system, everyone in that room who isn't technical is going to have a mind and a bit like deep breath, right? Because from their perspective, they're just seeing the money roll in, everything's doing okay, etc. So it's just all about managing that, managing expectations, and also making it sound like, you've really thought through this. It's not a half-baked plan. This isn't something you came up with on the train to work. This isn't just an opinion because you want to be a tech guy who's usually teching. There's a real serious reason why you want to do it, and there's real serious business outcomes from it.
Yes. And I guess going in with an incremental approach or a hybrid approach and identifying, as you say, perhaps would say the CPO, the areas of value that are currently bottlenecks, and really the impact could be realized the most, say the deferral rate of inbound customer service queries to the agents, and that agent assist needing to migrate across to a more self-serve model. That would be an area that you could move the needle on quite quickly in terms of the chief customer officer and their team, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So once that plan's in place and you're taking it to the exec team and then to the board, what advice would you have on how to present it and what form to follow there? And I know there's an element of how does the business work and how does the exec team work together, and are they long form or short form type people? But what would you be thinking?
Well, I guess if you've done a lead work and you've got all the necessary stakeholders brought in, I would always personally, unless there is a real serious reason why you have to go big bang, I would choose the best low-hanging fruit incremental modernization which you can, and I would present it together across the board. Maybe it's between you, someone else, or 3 other people, because that way it's not just you as a lone person in the crowd. You've all done this together, you've done the research, etc. And really, what you're looking to do is you're not only looking to get board approval, you're looking to get the board to understand or at least appreciate that this isn't a half-baked plan. There's been a lot of consideration in it, and they can see the value of doing it. So I think as long as you hit that note of, how do we mitigate risk? Are the relevant stakeholders pulled in? What are we going to focus on? What's going to be the return on investment? How quickly you get the value? How's that going to improve the business? If you hit all those notes in that presentation, you're fine. But like I say, make sure you do it in an environment that is welcoming for a modernization conversation. Like I say, if your business is hemorrhaging revenue and you're having to lay off 30% staff, it's probably not the right time to say, hey, we should rebuild the system for 10 million quid. It's probably not the best time to have that conversation. But if things are on the up and up and everything's going okay and the company's doing well, then maybe it's a good idea to say that's dangling till it's happening true. I would also be interested in talking to the board and saying, actually, I eventually want to do a big bang and explain why. But I'm going to do this first. And it depends on your board. Some boards have a real appetite for doing this and go, well, hold on a second, what's it like if we did Big Bang? And they'll have a conversation and go, okay, cool. And then maybe they want to pitch for the Big Bang because the appetite's there, the funding's in place, it's a really good time for the business. But maybe they're not so much, and maybe they will really appreciate the fact that you've decided to actually do it small and have value-driven, proof-driven sort of stuff before you actually go and approach them on a larger sort of expand of this modernization effort across other systems. So like I say, it depends, and you will know your board best. You'll know the personalities there. You'll know the state of the business, etc. Hopefully. So yeah, I mean that's the advice that I could really give, to be completely honest with you. But it's I guess that's the most logical, sensible thing that I guess anyone would really consider if they were in that position, to be honest.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And I guess if we imagine someone who's relatively new to role, or someone who's been in the position for a while, looking at the types of questions that people are coming to the IT or the R&D team to ask, the kinds of problems that they are bringing, that's going to be a good place to start, isn't it? So, for example, in a business that might be experiencing a downturn, and that's certainly what the global economy has in patches right now, as you said, it might be that cost is a thing, and that perhaps the CCOs come to you and said, is there a way that we can automate some of our customer support? Because I'm finding that I'm probably going to have to rationalize some of my headcount, and the number of self-service journeys will need to increase. Can you help me? That of course brings that person has bought the challenge in, ready to be addressed, and is already invested and keen to find a solution, right?
No, absolutely, and I think that's actually a really good example, actually, of how where it's not necessarily directly a necessity in technology, but it's actually a business need.
Yes.
So I think those are good examples. I think another one could be we see this sometimes where the infrastructure costs are very high. So maybe it's a case of tuning that down or finding optimizations in what you use to run your technology. So maybe your yearly bill goes from 500K a year down to 250, just little cost saving efforts like that. You'll have to do a little bit of modernization to do that. But I guess all of these little things kind of pile together, to be fair.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's a nice, simple, logical approach to modernization and bringing others on the journey. Can you give us a feeling for the speed of delivery of the first incremental piece of value? Because I think that's really important. And as someone that's quite old, that time frame has drastically diminished. And I think a lot of people who haven't been through a modernization effort, maybe just even in the last 3 years, will be surprised at how small the numbers you might give now could be, because things have moved on, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I guess there's always a question about, it depends what you're doing. If you're doing a big bang approach, is always going to have a lot more of a lead time than doing an incremental system. But I think it also comes down to the experience in-house. If you're just, for example, if your entire backend system's in Java and you're changing to a JavaScript backend and an Express backend, if you don't have the skill set, it doesn't matter what you put in place. The team is naturally going to be slower because it's a different language. Maybe you might have to bring on some third-party expertise, etc. So it's one of those things where I'm going to say the consultant's answer, it depends. But realistically speaking, it shouldn't take that long. I mean, we re-platformed an entire business in under 9 months, and now we're just adding products. So end-to-end is going to be 18 months. The technology is in place after month 9. So, if we'd done that to an entire system of front end and back end and made it extensible, if you're looking at one system, let's just say something like an order management system, well, that could be really quick. You might choose to, get an order management system, right, like a big commerce or something. That's even quicker, because then once you have the products in place and vendor, it's just a case of just adding it to your existing system or something. So realistically, it can, modernizing systems can take anywhere from 3 weeks to 6 months, depending on what you're doing. So like I say, if you're doing a big bang approach, it's obviously going to be a bit longer if you're touching major systems, but I think really quick. One of the clients we did a bit of work last year for, they wanted us to help modernize their data platform. We did it in 3 months. And the ingestion engines, we had new tools like Ciffy, DET, that sort of stuff. It was super quick. Did it in 3 months. Everything works. That was it, really. Like I say, it depends on what you're doing.
But I think that's really important when going to a board, because in years gone by, let's say 5-10 years ago, any IT project, as it would have been called at the time, would have been months to years, right? It wouldn't have been weeks to months. And that's a big shift, and that creates a lot of flexibility and excitement in the organization, right? Because the product team, for example, acknowledges that there's going to be some work going into replatforming or modernizing, and that's going to diminish the speed of features rolling off the rack on the old system. But if it's only for a couple of months and they can really see the team getting excited, and perhaps there's some external help, perhaps there's some new people hired in, and also some folks that reskill across to, let's say, a new language like JavaScript, it could be an entirely positive, all working together, results next quarter type scenario, right? Or at least a lot of progress shown next quarter.
No, 100%. Because I think, like you say, you hit now on the head. I think most people, when they hear this, they think, oh, we're going to have to throw everybody at this, and the entire business is going to run to a standstill. But that's really not the case. Depending on what you're doing, it can be anywhere from 2 to 5 people. If you have an engineering team of 20 to 50 people, you might lose one squad to this modernization effort, but everything else is still running the business.
That's also really important. There's very much a and rather than an and or approach to doing something new these days. Okay, let's talk about the things to avoid, the pitfalls along the way from your experience.
Interesting. So things that I've seen that kind of, and some of them actually done, I'll be honest. So the first one I think is over-promising. So I've seen a lot where people set really unrealistic expectations of what modernization can achieve in terms of things like timelines, costs. Maybe they might promise, for whatever reason, maybe we might say, oh, a system can be reduced in under a second or something like that. And then actually they've never considered that our system can do it, but if it interacts with third party, we can't control what a third party does. So things like that, so there's always going to be some sort of artificial bottleneck there. I think over-promising is a major, major problem, because even if you achieve all your goals, it's always on a sour note. And, your board's always going to remember you told them 3 months, but it took you, 6 months. And depending on, there's those circumstances, but then if you go back and say, okay, now I want to do it somewhere else, they're always going to be in their mind, okay, well, when Nick's given me an estimate of 6 months this time, does that mean it's going to take 9 months or 12 months or so on and so on? There's that. The second one is lack of communication. So you've got to understand, it's scary modernizing, I think, for a lot of people, for your existing engineers, for your existing staff, for people at board level, etc. So you need to really, really keep clear communication channels with stakeholders, give them regular updates and things like, well, what's the progress? What are the challenges? Where have we been successful? And all that kind of stuff, because you want to maintain the buy-in. So just because someone's written you a check doesn't mean that's it. They don't want to be like, come back in 9 months when it's done. Of course, to a certain degree they do, but actually they need to feel confident that they made the right choice in giving you this 6 months or however long it is to do it. And of course, if you've convinced several stakeholders to be bought into the process, maybe you spoke to Chief Product and Chief Marketing Officer, you don't just want to leave them in the woods, go, right, I'll do the tech stuff now, see you later. You want everyone to be involved in it, your existing staff, etc. as well. I think the first thing can be things like, involving things like the human factor, I call it. So people are always scared of the unknown. They're scared of uncertainty. That's really prevalent around employees. So you need to address this with your staff early on. To say to staff, hey, we're going to start doing this new. That doesn't mean you're going to lose your job in 6 months, or that doesn't mean that, we're going to force you to do something you don't want to do. It doesn't mean that, you're going to lose your purpose, etc. And you really need to do things like provide training and emphasize the benefits, really be open with people. Again, this comes back to communication, but the human factor is a major part in it. And I guess the final thing I would say is, failing to align to things like your business goals. So modernization is wonderful, but actually if there's no tangible outcome, if there's no ROI from what you're doing, then actually you've made a system easier, great, but it's achieved essentially nothing. So you put a lot of time and energy into something. So you always need to avoid pursuing modernization just for the sake of having new technology, or just for the sake of having something cool in the system, or you always have to tie it to clear business outcomes. So
yeah, because if your business is in the middle of an acquisition and is folding in some acquired systems and teams, it might not be the right time.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like you say, it's one of those things where there's lots of reasons to modernize, but actually if the business has a focus over here or something, again, it's all about timing and things that we've spoken about earlier. But those would be my 4 things: over-promising, not communicating, ignoring things like human factor, and just failing to align with business goals. I think these are the things I've seen time and time again. And like I say, I've also been privy to it. When I was a principal engineer, Well, the first times I was a principal engineer, I was leading Modernisation, and I had lack of communication factor. It was my fault. I assumed my CTO would do that. So I was just getting at it. I was in the tech, right, getting it done, etc. But actually, everyone around me was nervous. People on other teams were nervous. Product people were nervous, etc. So I really failed to understand that actually, by me just focusing, keeping my head down, and doing the objective really blindly, I was actually fostering this culture of, I guess, mystery and ambiguity and fear. Fundamentally, it boils down to fear, right? And really ruffling feathers of people that I needed to do. All I had to do was just have a bi-weekly or monthly meeting. And that was interesting. That was the first gig where I actually learned the value of having monthly public demos to everyone in a company when we're doing something new. So that's like now that we do it 101 ways with every gig that we do. But that was something I learned quite on early in my career. But like I say, we all fall to these pitfalls occasionally. Yeah.
That's how we learn, right? And I thank you for that list. So I'll add a couple into it. One of them, which you mentioned before, is I think there's a real mindset shift happening in the world of commerce. Teams are no longer being called IT, although they still are in some businesses. We're definitely moving towards R&D. We're moving towards product-led businesses, and of course that means that you've now got this group of product people whose role it is to be the conduit and the buffer between the engineering team and the business and the users. And that's really important, because if you were to come to me and say, look, the CCO's looking to automate some of the processes. They know they're going to be rationalizing some of their headcount. They know they're going to need to move users towards a self-service model. This is something that really needs to be considered in our monthly, quarterly, yearly roadmap. The product person is going to want to put that in. They're going to want to get involved and understand. Of course, they're going to ask some really good questions, such as, how would we move the needle? What's the value? And could this be done in an incremental way? And then I think the importance of having that conversation and helping the product person to understand that this is not tech debt. This is business enablement. This is investment in technology to solve a problem, right? Which is no different to investment in technology to add a feature to the product to solve a customer's problem, right? It's the same mentality. And I think it's really important for the product team and product people listening to understand that your product is the entire stack. It's not just the top layer. It's not just the acquisition journey and the renewal journey, for example, or the billing journey. There's a lot behind the scenes that must be considered. And the explosive growth in terms of a platform when it has been modernized it's really exciting, right? So then the last thing I'd add to that is, once the whole process of identifying the piece of value, putting together the business case, taking that to the board and the exec team and getting it signed off is successful, I've actually seen the other side of the coin, which is, what do you do when the board gets really enthusiastic and really buys into the fact that this is a wonderful new world? They've got just enough information and knowledge to be dangerous, and they come to the product and engineering team and say, so basically in X months, insert random number here, probably without estimation involved, we could have all of the features in V1 and V2. Is that right, Nick? What do you do?
Yeah. So it's interesting, because I've fallen foul of this myself in my career, and I've been caught in this trap. And at that point in my life, I was principal engineer somewhere else, and I was just swept up in it. We just successfully modernized a section. It was going great. We had stakeholders who were against it. Now they come into us and say, actually, we want to do this everywhere. And you get excited because you're like, yeah, let's do this. Come on. But what I would say, and having learned from that, is I did that, and we did it with one system, and then we tried to scale it to 3. And of course, we said, yeah, we can do it all at the same time, because we learned from what we did. We're fantastic with it. We had to then do things like add other people in, and that's an unknown factor. We had to add, more product people, more technology people in, and my team, we did that first modernization. They were the A-star team. They were like the perfect exemplar of what a great team looks like for product, technology, and delivery. these other teams, not to say that they weren't great, but they weren't as good as us. So we never really factored that in. I was like, I never understood that the other teams may not be, as great as we were.
And have to shift their ways of working, right?
They have to shift their ways of working and stuff like that. And for me, I didn't really appreciate actually that for some people that could be more of a jump, more of a shift in mentality than it can be for others. And it really depends on where you are, your appetite for learning things, etc. There was one person I remember on this team, and he was like, why do I have to learn this language? I've been coding this other language for like 50 years. I don't want to do this. And this person was like, really, every single meeting, they were a drag, etc. You can obviously argue that's a personal problem, but what the problem there was, I didn't really anticipate that would ever be a problem. And we did deliver those services, but actually we didn't deliver them smoothly. They were not on time. They were quite delayed. And actually it kind of killed the buzz in the business for actually continuing to do this. And I don't say it was necessarily a failure, but it certainly wasn't a resounding success. We achieved our outcomes, but there wasn't that much of we did continue to modernize beyond that, but there wasn't as much of a ferocious appetite as there'd once been when we did it successfully the first time. So how I'd always say to people is, again, even if people are excited and they're throwing money at you and they're like, let's do this, let's take a step back again. This is a new business proposal. So they said, we want to do it for these other systems. Do what you did the first time. Research it, understand it, who's going to be involved in it, who are the stakeholders. So do everything as if it's a brand new pitch. Add yourself in a bit of extra time, a bit of extra wiggle room in case unknowns happen, and then go back. Now, I promise you, they're not going to be that happy about it because they came to you excited and saying, I want to get this done in 3 months. And actually you maybe come back and you said, well, actually, I can do 50% of that in 3 months, or I can do a third of it in 3 months, or whatever it is that you've come back with. But in the long run, they will actually always be grateful and thankful that you've done that with a level of consideration. And maybe you've also presented an offer if you actually want all these things done in 3 months, I need more of X or Y. So as long as you give people options, they always will appreciate it. And people won't crucify you for delivering something and being rational and being, I guess, respectful with the resources that are available and that sort of stuff, as opposed to promising to do something and then inevitably failing.
Yes, or even worse, it's just saying yes, right? Because that of course is it's a huge there's a huge incentive to say yes to you can have the funding.
Yeah,
and it's so important to take a moment and say, great. So the next step is to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And I've spoken to a few people about this before, and it's a bit like if you've just gone on a roller coaster and you're full of adrenaline, you come off it, and if someone goes, "Do you want to go again?" Most people would be like, "Yes," right, without even thinking about it. That's because they've got all that energy and stuff surging in their system, like, oh my God, that was great. But actually, you need to, that's the really important time to take a step back and go, whoa, let me think about this a little bit. No. So, but I think, to be completely honest with you, most CTOs that I've met and I have the fortune of working with, especially with 100 Ways and stuff, are very tempered, very experienced, very tempered, and they've done a lot of the stuff that I mentioned earlier on in our careers and stuff like that. So I guess this won't be any new news to them, but you still can get a little bit sometimes emotionally swept up when someone comes to you and says, "Do you want to do this?" And there's a part of you, especially if you're like a very competitive person like I'm, going to go, "Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it 10 times faster," no, etc. So yeah, so it's just about, like I say, approaching it in a measured way, and ultimately, you will get the opportunity to redo everything. You'll get the opportunity to make a brand new world. Just do it in a measured way, really.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so before we wrap up, any closing thoughts on the approach to modernization that you've seen work and getting funding for ideas?
I think the only thing I'll say is, we've spoken about how you approach it, how you get funding, what you should do. The only thing I haven't spoken about is how you measure success. And I think that's probably a good thing to round it out on, because that's really important. So I guess first things quite obvious is things like operational metrics. You need to really figure out, what are you tracking in this new system that makes it efficient, makes it system performant, what's the uptime like, etc. So as you embark on your modernization effort, you need to show contrasting metrics to prove to the board not only have you fiscally maybe improved the outcome or made it better for engineers, there's actually a tangible reason as well. There's a lot of benefits there. Again, the second thing I would say is focus on things like financial metrics. So how are you measuring your ROI here? Is it just a case of you need less staff to operate a system now? Is it a case of this system allows you to do more sales? Is it a case of it costs you less money because the infrastructure is less? Whatever it is that you've done, figure that out. Furthermore, customer experience, often neglected, but at the end of the day, customers are the people that use your system. So is there a real benefit in the one system you benefit? Do customers find it easier? Do they find it better? In which case, that's a great thing to have for your next modernization sort of pitch. And then finally, I guess it's just a case of thinking about things like, how does it work for compliance? What about risk management, that sort of stuff? And then closing out with things like, how has your team improved in terms of agility and innovation? Because at the end of the day, if you can show there's financial benefits, there's operational benefits, there's better customer experience, and the team is faster, smarter, and better, maybe you need less of team members, actually that's just preparing you, setting you up for your next pitch. But that's also a really great way to report to the board that it's been successful. So it's not just about, I promised the board I would do this in 3 months, I've done it. You really want to show them actually this was a real worthwhile investment for 3 months. Would you like to take this ride with me again? Or if they don't, doesn't matter, but you've actually shown some outcome.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Thank you. So we've really learned that modernization and the process of upgrading and enhancing elements of your system and related stack has come a long way. It doesn't need to be a big bang anymore. There are other ways to approach modernization. There are others involved in the process of modernizing what formerly used to be called IT and is now the technology that drives so many areas of our businesses. And a good place to start is to start with the questions that are coming into the R&D organization and the types of problems that the team want to be solving. I think we've talked a bit about the risks and how to measure success. So thank you. That's been a really good summary for people. And I hope that's been useful. And thanks for being on the show. And folks, thanks for tuning in. Look after each other, and we'll see you next time.